Good morning, good morning, good morning to you here in Jamaica. Good afternoon to those in New York City. They are 1 hour ahead of us here. This is Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. I'm Bruce Golding. And before I go to the opening shot, let me express my regret at the passing recently of Dr. Frank Folk. Frank served in the military, U.S. military, for 28 years, attaining the rank of Brigadier General. He served as the Director of Military Medicine at Kingsbrook Jewish College. He was also an Associate Professor at Downstate Medical College and served on the Board of Directors at King's College Hospital. He practiced medicine in Brooklyn, and he was well known to many people in the Jamaican community there. And so I want to express my condolences to his widow, Nancy, who I know very well, and to the other members of his family. When I left high school back in the 1960s, I had the privilege of going to university and getting a university degree. I say privilege because most school leavers at that time didn't have that opportunity. At that time, we only had one university, the University of the West Indies, which I believe at that time had only about 600 students, which would be about the size today of one of our small high schools. Back then, getting a university degree was advantageous, but it wasn't essential. School leavers who had passed the senior Cambridge exam, what we now call the CXC, had little difficulty in getting a job in industry, in commerce, in the banks, or in the civil service. Some even became article clerks to lawyers and went on to become lawyers themselves without having obtained a university degree. Back then, too, tuition fees at the UWI were relatively affordable. I can't quite remember, but I think it at that time the fees were something like £60 a term. In those days, we didn't have semesters; we had 3 terms. So £60 a term, which would, in today's money, work out at about $36,000 a year. Times have changed and things have changed. Today we have several universities, both public and private. Today we have over 40,000 students attending degree-granting institutions in Jamaica. Having a university degree is no longer a privilege. It is virtually a necessity if you want to secure a good future for yourself, if you want to build a career, if you want to achieve financial independence. With the advancement of technology, business processes have become knowledge-driven. You can hardly get a job in a bank today unless you have at least a first degree. But how does the average school leaver today, especially those with severely limited financial resources, how do they reach that platform? The first problem we encounter, of course, is how many of them can even think of approaching that platform, even if they are able to afford it, given the fact that 70% of our high school leavers have not achieved the minimum requirements for entering a university. But for the moment, for the purpose of the discussion today, let us focus on the 30% who qualify to go to a university. What challenges do they face? The biggest challenge, of course, is the cost, the fees that have to be paid. University education has become very expensive. Let me give you an illustration. Tuition fees at UWI range from around $300,000 a year if you're studying something, for example, in the creative arts, to $855,000 a year if you're studying medicine. If you go to UTECH, you will have to pay between $270,000 a year and $510,000 a year, depending on the course of study that you're pursuing. At the Northern Caribbean University, the fees range from $500,000 a year to $750,000 a year. At the UCC, the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, the fees average $325,000 a year. How does the household helper or the small farmer or the security guard or the police corporal, even police inspector, how do they find that kind of money to send their son or their daughter to university? And if they're even able to scrape and save that money, what do they do if they have 2 or 3 or 4 children? You know, I remember in the old days that poor families who wanted the best for the children had to make some painful decisions. They had to pick and choose. They couldn't afford to school all of them. So they would arrive at a position where they had to accept that since they can't afford to properly educate all the children, they had to make a determination as to which one best showed, best demonstrated that he or she had a head that could take learning, as they used to say. I know of many families today where one sibling has been quite successful, has gone on to become a professional engineer, a doctor, a bank manager. But the other siblings, the brothers and sisters, are struggling to make ends meet. He or she, fortunately, was the one whose head was determined, could take learning. Successive governments have not been unmindful of the predicament. At the UWI, for example, the fees that the students have to pay, and I told you what those fees are, high as those fees are, they are heavily subsidized by the government. Those fees represent only 20% of the cost, the real cost that the university incurs for providing that education. The government pays the other 80%. This year, for example, the government subvention to the University of the West Indies is of the order of $10 billion. UTECH gets a subvention from the government of around $2.4 billion this year. Then, of course, there is the Student Loan Bureau, which was established by Mr. Edward Seaga in 1970. The Student Loan Bureau provides loans to students to help them to meet their tuition costs. It has been a godsend for many students. Many of them would not otherwise have been able to go to university. But the Student Loan Bureau has its own challenges. One of those challenges is the fact that you are required to have someone who will guarantee the loan. So that if you as the student who borrows the money does not pay back the loan, that guarantor becomes liable, which means that the guarantor has to be somebody that can demonstrate the financial capability to repay the loan. Otherwise, they don't qualify to be a guarantor. Where is the son or daughter of a helper likely to be able to find that kind of guarantor who is going to be willing to take on that risk? Added to that is the fact that the Student Loan Bureau is not able to lend the student the full amount to cover the fees. There are more dogs than bones. So it has to share out the money that is available among the qualified applicants. Last year, for example, the Student Loan Bureau provided loans for just under 15,000 students at a total cost of around $4 billion, which works out at an average of about $250,000 per student. So you may get a loan that covers only a portion of the tuition fees. And remember, that if you're talking about tuition fees of $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and you get a student loan for $250,000, that helps you with the first year. What about year 2 and year 3? You have to find that. You have to find the balance. Then, of course, there's the cost of living. Not the cost of living, but the cost of living while you are studying. Students from far out of town, if they don't have a relative they can catch with, they have to rent somewhere or they have to board with somebody. That is an additional cost, plus the bus fare and the lunch money, you name it. Rich countries are able to step in to make university education more accessible. In some of the Scandinavian countries, for example, and Norway, Denmark come readily to mind. They provide free university education. These are high-income countries, and they impose high taxes. In those countries, income tax rate is as high as 45%. But in return for those high taxes, they provide free health care, social security benefits, including pension when you reach a certain age, and, as I mentioned, free education all the way to university. We don't have the resources to match that. But if we are to move forward, if we are to equip ourselves to compete and even to survive in this global knowledge-driven market, more of our young people will have to have a university education. If not, we're going to be left behind. But how are they going to be able to do that, especially those from low-income families, if the cost of going to a university is, for so many of them, out of their reach? That is our topic for today. That's what we're talking about. And we want to examine that issue, not just to see the predicament in which young people find themselves, but to look at ways that could make a difference, to see if there are ways that we could enable students coming from poor families to be able to obtain a university education in a way that is affordable, that is sustainable, because it's important for the development of our country. That's what we're talking about today. And please note that you can follow us On Instagram at bruce.goldingjm. Bruce.goldingjm on Instagram. And we would welcome your comments and feedback. This is Jamaica Live. We talk issues. We try to find solutions. We want to make Jamaica a better place. And since we're talking today about financing tertiary education, we wanted to start the discussions by talking to some people who can give us perhaps the most important perspective. These are persons who are at the critical point in the whole process. These are persons who, as students, have had to wrestle with this difficulty of finding a way to finance secondary education. And we're very pleased to welcome to the program Ms. Robyn Murray, who is the UTECH Student Union President, and who I'm sure is going to be able to tell us how students at UTECH, as indeed students at all the other universities, how are they coping? How do they manage through all of this difficulty? And importantly, how many of them are left behind because they were not able to manage? Ms. Murray, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
I wanted you to give us the perspective of the students. Start from a student who has left high school, has attained the qualifications to enter a university, but comes from a family where they just don't have the resources to meet the tuition costs. Walk us through to tell us what are the options. What is the experience of that typical student in trying to achieve the laudable ambition and objective of getting a university education to equip themselves to cope in this technologically bewildering world? How do they go about it?
Well, as students, the first thing that we think about when we're applying to university is how are we going to actually pay for this, right? Apart from those persons who have been lucky and privileged enough to have their family members offset costs completely, you have those students that are left back with options like student loan. You have those students that rely heavily on scholarships. You have those students that rely heavily on sponsors. Right. And something that we've seen a lot here from the student union perspective, because we do give out grants and bursaries and scholarships to actually help with tuition payments, is that a lot of persons aren't even aware of how to go about financing their education or what are the avenues that are available for them to finance their education. And, looking at it from somebody coming out of high school, you might not necessarily meet, other than the academic requirements for a scholarship, you might not necessarily meet the holistic portion of it. You might not necessarily qualify for a student loan. And something that I believe is very not just interesting, but very great that university offers, we have specific scholarships for specific programs. And it's just more so about promoting awareness for them. But then you have those persons that aren't necessarily encouraged to apply for scholarships because of the fear of, I might not be successful, or I might, I put it in my head from the get-go that I'm not going to get through.
Well, let me interrupt you for a moment. I mean, it's good news to hear that there are scholarships that are available for students like that. But give me an idea. Out of every 10 students attending your university, for example, how many of them would have been fortunate enough to secure scholarships? Out of 10?
Out of 10, I would say 6 or 7.
As much as that?
10. Yes.
And those are scholarships. Those are scholarships funded by what? Government or private sector or both?
Both. So government, private sector, and UTECH themselves.
Or UTECH provides scholarships as well?
Yes.
And those UTECH scholarships, those are free scholarships in the sense that you don't have to pay back that money?
No, definitely not.
Well, I'm glad to hear that as many as but how much of the tuition fees do those scholarships cover?
Well, I know that usually they stipulate a range, right, between 150 to 350, and there are some of them that actually cover the full expenses.
So for those 6 students, they have really got a heads up in terms of moving on. What about the other 4?
Definitely. What about the other 4? Well,
But
there's
some of those other 4, of course, perhaps would come from families where they can afford it, no?
and also the student loan. Yes,
And
a lot
student
of our
loan.
students
Okay.
depend heavily on the student loan bureau as well.
But explain to me, it's just something I've been wondering about. When you go to somewhere like UTECH, and let us say your tuition fees are what, $300,000, $400,000, depending on the course and the credits, no?
Yes.
So let us say that my fees are $350,000 for the year. I go to the student loan bureau. How much am I likely to get to borrow towards those fees?
Well, from what I've seen, SLB, especially with the students that come with their questions, SLB usually covers their full diet sheet. So each program has a diet sheet with the amount of credits that they're required to take, and there's a cost per credit for different modules offered by different faculties. And based on what you go to SLB with, you go with your diet sheet, and they cover what's on your diet sheet.
All right,
That's usually the procedure.
And they would cover me not just for the first year, but for the duration of the course?
Well, to my understanding, it goes year by year.
So next year I would have to apply again?
Next year, you'd have to go back to ensure that the commitment is still there.
Yes. And there's no certainty that when I go back next year, I'm going to get through?
Well, I would say based on what I've seen, usually those persons who have returned and, they maintained a good academic relationship with their studies, so they kept their GPA up,
yes.
They usually do get it again the following year. I can't really think of a large amount of persons that were denied a second time.
Yes. So what you're saying is that about 6 out of 10 get scholarships, and the other 4...
5. Let's say 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10?
3. Yeah, 5 out of 10 for scholarships, 3 for student loan, and you have those 2 persons that the 2 out of 10 that get the full funding from their family or sponsors.
I see. Now let us. So the ones who get the scholarships, once they graduate, they go into the job market and they get on with their lives. The 3 who depended on student loans, they have a debt burden that they have to discharge, no?
Yes.
Now, from your knowledge, how much of a burden is that? Are the graduates of UTECH, for example, able to secure the kind of employment that would enable them comfortably, knowing that they have to live? Some of them have families that they have to look after. Would enable them comfortably to repay that student loan?
Well, I do have some friends that are in that predicament, and I can, just share with you a general overview of what they're experiencing right now. And in fact, I have a particular friend that had to secure a job before he came out of university to be able to pay that back and still have money to sustain himself, right? So I would say the university does provide avenues for us for us to get jobs after, right? But it's the amount of money that you're getting paid, right? Because at the end of the day, when you look at your paycheck, you have to take out your bills. You have to take out, anything that you need for your family. You have to put aside money for savings, and then you have your student loan commitments to pay, right? So unless you have made the necessary preparations, you might find yourself struggling to settle all of those commitments and still maintain a livable amount.
But the Student Loan Bureau repayment terms, as I understand it, I don't have the details, are quite concessionary, no?
And that's true, but it depends again on the amount that you're getting paid. Because what if I'm just out of university, I just get my degree, and I'm only getting paid, say, $45,000 per month or $50,000 per month? It's not feasible for me to be able to pay back that commitment plus my rent plus all of that, right? So it depends on the type of job that you're able to secure.
Which I imagine also depends on the type of degree that you left the university with.
Precisely, and it's not, and there's this conversation amongst young people that, even when I have my degree, I'm still not getting enough money. Even though I sat down for 4 years, 3 years, got a degree, I'm still not being paid degree money. So there's also that concern.
Well, you're my first guest on the program today, but to be quite honest to you, you have sort of eased some of the burden that I had on my mind because I didn't know that as many students as you have indicated are benefiting from scholarships. And that is very good news to hear. And you say that about 30%, if 50% getting scholarships, 30% getting student loans. They have challenges in dealing with those student loans, but I'm now beginning to understand why so many people are still able to go to university.
Yes, and something that, I believe it's important to highlight. I've seen the conversations about increasing tuition fees, and, UTECH has not had an increase in tuition fees since 2019, or tuition has not moved since 2019. And, it's always been said that we have one of the lowest program fees, especially for business, for law, and for other faculties. Computer science, we have one of the lowest tuitions.
Yes.
So, and I can see why a lot of persons would prefer to come here versus other institutions because of the amount of money they'd have to pay.
Yes.
Right? And I don't know, I think it's very commendable that the university was able to operate.
And to hold the fees.
Exactly. And that to me was amazing because we didn't have that uprise from students or that uproar from students to say, no, my tuition increasing. Not to say that that persons can easily afford it all the time, because at the end of the day, it's a hefty sum of money, right? But when you look at the other degree programs that are offered, to me, it's very commendable.
Yes. Ms. Murray, I want to thank you very much for coming on today. You have really been helpful. You have started the discussion off on the right footing. So thank you very, very much.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah, we take a break. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We are on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about the challenges of financing tertiary education. What do we need to do? What changes can be made to provide greater opportunity for our young people to equip themselves by getting a university degree, to equip themselves to be capable, competent in this ferociously competitive global market in which we find ourselves. And we're very pleased to welcome to the program now Mr. Julian Robinson. He's the opposition spokesman on finance. Julian, welcome to the program.
You and morning to your listeners.
Morning, Julian. Both of us have been to university, no? Both of us were privileged that because I know your father and you perhaps know my family, we were privileged to have families that could afford to see us through university. What does your helper do or my helper do to make sure that their children are able to pursue the same path of achievement? What's the process?
Well, I must tell you, this is one of the issues that pains me a lot. And I said that as a member of parliament. I was actually the last batch of students who went through UE before they increased the cost sharing. I graduated in 93, and at that time, we were at 10% of the economic costs, and it moved up significantly from there. So there was a marked difference between those who came after me and subsequently all the others since. And, I worry that we are reversing the gains of education being a tool of upliftment, particularly for the poor, because they simply can't afford it. And I see it as a member of parliament where people will come to me requesting assistance. They find the first semester's fees and they scrape through friends, family, they borrow the money, but then they just can't manage after the first semester. So it's a big issue. It's a big issue for us as a country because we don't want tertiary education only to be the preserve of the elite and those who can afford it.
Julian, can we drill down on it a little bit? Because I started the program with a kind of depressing analysis. But then I had a talk with Ms. Robyn Murray, who is the president of the UTECH Students Union. and she gave me a somewhat different perspective. Let's look at it. When I was there, I don't know about 93 when you were there, perhaps it was different. But when I was there, UTECH was still cast, no? There was one university here.
Right.
And I can't remember. We had less than 1,000 students at the Mona campus.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have several universities. They all appear to me, both in terms of what I see when I drive past them and also when I look at the data, they all appear to be bursting at the seams. We have a total of over 40,000 people attending universities in Jamaica today. I don't know that they have any unutilized capacity, so to speak. So the first question I would ask is, how are these people managing? They can't all be children of rich people, rich families. When I spoke with Miss Murray, I asked her, how do they cope? She's, of course, speaking from the UTECH perspective. She says about 50% of the students get scholarships, either government scholarships or scholarships offered by UTECH itself or scholarships sponsored by private sector entities. About 3 out of every 10 are able to finance their way through the Student Loan Bureau. And the other 2 would include those, of course, who are able to find the resources one way or the other. So the kind of concern that I opened the program with and you are expressing, are we overblowing it?
Well, I must tell you, those statistics seem on the very positive side. That's not my experience as a member of parliament with the requests that I get from students in my own constituency. That 50% get scholarships, that seems very high to me. And even if they do, my experience is that the scholarships rarely cover the full extent of either tuition or the other expenses that they had. So I don't know if UTECH is peculiar in that regard, but I don't think those statistics would bear out across the board for tertiary students. Absolutely not. And I mean, my experiences are the majority of people who come to me, one, even though Students Loan Bureau is there, they can't access it because of the issues with guarantors. And secondly, the main reason is they don't have family, friends, or people close to them who are in a position to stand as guarantors. So some of them work. They might work part-time, but they're in jobs that don't give them the flexibility that they can pay fees and live off those things. So maybe the ones that come to me, and I don't think I'm unusual as an MP, are ones who are bright, they matriculate, they qualify, but they simply don't have it. And they come to the MP's office hoping that the MP can help them to put the funds together. They generally put something together with, as I said, family and friends. But that number she gave seems very high to me.
I know what you're talking about. When I was an MP myself, a big chunk of my CDF went to finance tertiary tuition fees. But tell me, from the opposition perspective, I want to talk with you about the proposal that the leader of the opposition made about removing the requirement for guarantors. But let us leave that aside for a moment. Right. What is the opposition thinking in terms of how the financing of tertiary education could be made more affordable and the securing of a university degree could be made more accessible?
All right. Well, we first have to accept that it is expensive to deliver tertiary education. And while people may compare our fees to other countries, our income levels are certainly significantly lower than the other countries that we compare it with. So when a student has to find, for example, and I take teachers because I have a lot of teachers who come to me seeking support because they need to do a degree at Mike or at St. Joseph's. And you're talking about $200,000 per term. Now, you can't cost the university because that's what it costs to deliver it, but how does a teacher afford it? Now, I do think, and it's a difficult balance because there are many calls on the budget, and in particular, at different levels, and there's a call for more for early childhood education. But I do think we have to find a way to provide greater assistance to those students who meet the requirements to be in university, which is really what the opposition leader is saying. Make it easier for them to access loans through the Student Loans Bureau, even if they don't have guarantors, so that they can pay for it, and also ensure that the repayment terms are not as onerous as they are. You know, one of the difficulties students have once they graduate, regardless of what they're earning, they are required to pay back so much that they can't live based on what they have to pay back. So I think we have to make it easier. We don't have control over the cost element because the universities deliver the cost, their overall economic costs. And we're still not at 100% with UA.
Let us discuss that a little, Julian. I wasn't able, before I came on this morning, I wasn't able to look at the Student Loan Bureau repayment terms, although I recall that successive governments have sought to make it less burdensome on students, no? Yeah. But part of the problem, and you alluded to this a while ago, I was amazed when I was up at the university on my fellowship. I did some study on what happens to university graduates. You know, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to do some tracer studies, which sought to identify what were the employment achievements of graduates. I almost dropped out of my chair when I saw the high percentage of UWI graduates, because it was confined to UW, who after they left with a degree were earning like $40,000-$50,000 a week, and even less than that. As a matter of fact, a significant number of them, and I'm talking about 2015, 2016, were earning just over $1 million a year with a degree. Now, with that kind of income, I don't know how you pay back any student loan.
And that's the challenge. I mean, as you know, with the economy, there are not tons of high-paying jobs that people can go into. The BPO sector is one that employs a lot of graduates, but those are not high-paying jobs, certainly not at the entry level. You may have somebody who takes home now 80,000, maybe 100,000 if at the entry level. But you know, after you pay your rent, your transportation, all of these things, you're really not left with much more that you can pay back your student loan, and that is a big part of the difficulty that many of the students have. Now, it's a chicken and egg thing. You want to attract higher paying investments into the higher paying jobs, which means getting higher paid investments into the country, but that requires higher level skills. So the reality is we are at the lower level of the BPO value chain, and the reason we are is that, you know, when I was in government, we couldn't attract a software development company to Jamaica because we couldn't find 300 coders who were willing to do that kind of job. So the reality is you have to invest in tertiary so that you can attract investments where people will employ people at improved salaries. And we are, unfortunately, to say we are predominantly a low-wage economy. Whether it is tourism, construction, BPO, the majority of the jobs, bauxite aluminum may be an exception, but that industry has its own challenges. The majority of the jobs tend to be at the lower end of the value chain.
Isn't part of the problem not, because this is what I found, I'd love to hear your view, that our students, when they enter university, are not being properly guided or are not guiding themselves in terms of what they should study. I think part of that may be due to the fact that because funding is such a big problem, they go for the cheaper courses. So you end up, for example, if you go to University of the West Indies, you pay about $300,000 a year for if you're studying mass comm. But if you want to study applied sciences, you're talking about $500,000 a year.
Right.
So you make a choice based on what you can afford.
Right.
So we end up with a whole heap of mass comm graduates, perhaps far more than we need, when the kind of jobs, the kind of study that would have secured you a reasonably paying job is short of skilled graduates.
Correct.
Ought we not to be focusing some attention? There is the university. I get annoyed, you see, because when I spoke with people at some universities, and I don't want to identify them, I got a sense that they're approaching it on the basis this is a market-driven thing. So if people want to study Turkish ancestry, they are quite prepared to offer that, so long as people will pay the fees to come in and study. As to whether or not that is a marketable skill, they're not too concerned about that. And I got annoyed about that.
And you must ask the question, should we have as many universities offering law degrees?
That's right.
A perfect example.
That's right.
Why is a tech university offering law degrees where you have an oversaturation?
Well, I asked that question and I was told because you have a lot of people lining up to register.
Agreed. But then should, in medicine and in law, the universities charge closer to the full economic cost for those reasons, which is also another issue, a separate issue that has to be examined too, because that puts a severe burden. I have a lot of students who happily the parents will come and say, my daughter got into medicine, and I say, which part of the program, the government sponsored one or the full fee one? Generally, it's the full fee one, and people, when they're hit with the scale of the fees, many of them just can't take up the offer.
Yes,
they're not able to. But I think we also have to provide incentives for, as you said, whether it is in the science subjects, the subjects that can propel us as a nation, that can facilitate innovation, versus other disciplines which we may have more than we need. We have to provide some incentives for people to go into the areas which can make a difference. And part of the challenge too with our system, which is more the English than the American system, is that you have to make choices early in your university career. You have to choose early what you want to do, versus in an American system where a lot of people do liberal arts degrees and they really don't know what they want to do, but they can figure it out after. But they get the discipline of being in a tertiary institution, learning how to think critically, etc. But in our system, you are forced into a choice, mainly because you have to figure out what you're going to do when you leave. Because you have to, if you're going to pay back that loan, or if your parents have chumped up and put you through university, you may have obligations that you have to fulfill immediately.
Julian, before we run out of time, tell me about the opposition proposal to remove the requirement for guarantor. How would that work?
Well, it remains a major challenge for particularly students from poor backgrounds to find persons who are, one, able, and secondly, willing to stand as guarantors. Based on the Student Loan Bureau, the monies that are being lent are secured, meaning the Students Loan Bureau has made provision for them. Now, obviously, we have issues where people borrow monies and don't pay them back. And I think, with the advent of credit reporting and credit scoring, it will put more of an onus on those students to ensure that they make good on their obligations. But removing the guarantors, in our view, will give greater access to students from poor households so that they can borrow the funds. And as I said, with credit reporting, if they default, then they're going to have a very poor credit score going forward, which, as I said, will hopefully be an incentive for them to try to honor the obligations. But too many can't access it because of guarantors.
Isn't it likely, though, to negatively impact the repayment flows? The last time I looked at the numbers, don't hold me to it, but the last time I looked at the numbers, somewhere in the region of 50% of the funds that the Student Loan Bureau is able to lend comes from loan repayments. The other 50% comes from the budget. So if you have a situation where there are no guarantors, so you're relying solely on your ability to extract that money from borrowers, aren't you likely to run into a situation where instead of providing loans for 14,000 students each year, you drop down to 9 because the money not coming in?
It is a risk, and I'll accept that. But as I said, I think with credit scoring now, students will think twice about just willful online obligations. I mean, I think you have two sets of scenarios where students genuinely want to pay back, but they may not have a job, or the job is not paying them enough to pay back. And then you just have others who regard it as free money given by the government, so they don't need to pay it back.
Is there a way, Julian, you're opposition spokesman on finance, is there a way that some fiscal incentive could be offered to the private sector to provide greater funding in terms of scholarships without impairing our consult fund?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can, up to a certain amount, you may want to provide a tax write-off on what they provide in scholarship support. That portion may be written off.
What obtains now? If I have a company and I'm prepared to fund $5 million worth of scholarships each year, do I get any tax benefit for that?
Not that I'm aware of. Don't hold me to it, but I don't think there is anything at this point in time. And I'm saying that's something that could be put in place to encourage more private sector companies to do more to facilitate those students who want access.
Anything else in terms of the opposition thinking, in terms of how we could?
Well, let me tell you, tertiary education has expanded. I think when I was at UE, I think we were probably 5% of the population with access to tertiary. It's close to 15 to 20% now, because you have more tertiary institutions offering courses, which is a good.
Plus, it has become more necessary now.
But it has become more necessary. But as I said, there is a danger that we reverse the gains because of what is the prohibitively high cost of access to tertiary education, and the systems not being as friendly to students who want to do it. So
we're out of time. We're out of time, but I'm going to impose on you and ask you to come back another time, because one of the things that I would love to discuss with you, and it's a challenge that the universities have to face, particularly University of West Indies, my alma mater, is the cost of operating the universities. Because I believe that there's a whole heap of improvement that can be done.
Absolutely.
There.
I'm with you on that one.
And secondly, successful universities don't depend on tuition and government subvention. They earn a lot of money. I was amazed when I was up there recently. I was amazed at the kind of research work that has been done by the university. But you know what happened to the research, Julian?
People don't know.
It locked up in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah, people don't know about
Not only have people like industry not sought to find out what they do, but I will tell you, the academic jealousies and isolation. A scientist at university who finds a way to make 2 blades of grass grow where only one grew before, don't want nobody know about it.
True.
Because as far as he's concerned, that is his intellectual property.
Property, right.
How are we going to get over this nonsense?
Well, you register your intellectual property, so you ensure that nobody can teach it or take it.
Well, you have problems in the university because they have some rule where it belongs to the university, and the person who developed it said, well, if it belongs to you, you run with it because I'm not running with you. It's something that needs to be addressed. I want you to come back another time and let us discuss that.
All right, no problem. All right.
Julian Robyn is opposition spokesman on finance. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay,
We're up on the midday break here, 1 o'clock in New York. When we come back, we talk to Beauregard and his crew. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99, and we should be linking now with New York. I don't have Beauregard online yet. We're going to hail him up as soon as he comes on. We're very pleased to welcome now Dr. Donovan Stanbury, who is the Registrar at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies. Man with quite a distinguished record. Used to be permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture. Dr. Stanbury.
How are you? How are you, Mr. Gordon?
I'm very well, and congratulations. When I see you now, I have to bow, Dr. Stanbury. Tell me something, Donovan. The university, your university is faced with some horrendous financial challenges. There are two options that have been bandied around. One is for the government to find more money to support the university, and the other is for the students to pay higher fees. That sounds like offering me a choice between cyanide and arsenic. One kill you right away, the other one take a little time.
So Gordon, there are some realities. My research and understanding in terms of models that funding models for university, are really three models. One, universities like Harvard, etc., that some rich person gave them an endowment and they live off the interest and so on. Two, some of the private universities where there's no support from government and they recover everything from the students. And three, the hybrid where the government makes a contribution and the university is expected to get the rest of the funding from student fees, research, commercial activities, and so on.
Yeah, but isn't that the fourth? Isn't that the fourth? In other words, a lot of universities earn a lot of non-tuition income.
Mm-hmm. At UMONA, that's exactly what we're doing now. Where we are now, Mr. Gordon, there was a time, as you know, when government paid up to 80%. That was a model. And the student fee would cover the rest. As you know, as a group, the Caribbean economies really have not grown substantially in the last 20, 30 years. You have a 1, 2, 3, 4% here and there. And so the governments have not been able to, even though the desire might be there, to fund the university as they would want to because of fiscal issues, because of debt to GDP and those kind of things.
Donovan, I want to come back to that, but I want us to spend just a minute focusing on something. You talk about commercial income, right?
So
I know the university earns some money. I don't know how much, but they earn I suspect a reasonable amount of money from the KFCs and the Burger Kings and the Sutherlands and so on, right?
Yes.
But let me give you an example. Let me tell you where my mind is going. Years ago, and when I talk about years ago, I talk about the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Grace Kennedy had a problem where it had on the shelf some mango nectar.
Mm-hmm.
And they discovered that in a relatively short period of time, the tins were corroding and they had to take them off the shelf. Carlton Alexander brought down some scientists, I think it was from the University of Florida, at great cost, to find out what was causing this and what could be done to correct it. Why was our university had not put itself in a position where the university would have been Grace Kennedy's first point of call? To say, hey, we have a problem, come try and see if you can help us. Let me add to that. I spent some time over at the Faculty of Technology, what do you call it? Engineering.
Science and Technology.
Yeah. Donovan, I was impressed as hell with some of the work that has been done there. Scientific work. Where they have, and not just academic sciences, they had looked at practical situations, problems that were being experienced in the factories, in the productive endeavors, and they seem to have made some breakthroughs, but it locked up in the university. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why isn't there a nexus between the university's research and development capability and the challenges that are being faced by businesses to be able to compete globally, so that A, we could be more productive in our factories and in our business processes, and B, the university could have a stream of income that it never had before that could help to meet its operating costs. Why are we so slow to move there?
I don't think we're slowing. I think what we need to do is to expand. I mean, even the COVID pandemic, we were able to demonstrate that we can make a contribution to solving practical problems out there in society. So our students in engineering, led by their lecturers, were in fact repairing ventilators. We were one of the first entities to start making hand sanitizers and those kind of things. And I don't know how many people knows, but when you go to a biomedical lab or one of those commercial labs to do your COVID test, many of those labs really don't have the capability. So it is our labs here at UA that did the actual test and then send it to them and they give the patients. So there
are some institutional issues that need to be addressed. One of which, and I don't know if I'm taking tales out of school, but to tell you the truth, I don't really care. One of the issues that has to be addressed is that the current, I don't know what you call it, whether it is a policy or whether it is a condition of service, the current arrangement that the university has regarding scientific breakthroughs is not sufficiently responsive to the work of the scientists. One person said to me, they need to tear it up and rewrite it, right? Because the people who the people who invent things, the people who make breakthroughs, can be just treated as if, well, this is part of your job anyhow, that the benefits of that belong to the university. And the current sharing arrangement, I don't know why the question of 30% stick in my head, but the current arrangement does not encourage scientists to really assert themselves. And what I found, again, maybe taking tales out of school, what I found is that when some of the guys at the university, bright, young, scientific-minded people, when they make breakthroughs, whether it is part of some PhD dissertation, they lock it up in some drawer somewhere. Nobody know about it.
You're correct, Mr. Golden, and we're trying to correct that by trying to engender a more entrepreneurial spirit here in the university. How do we monetize the breakthrough that we have made in research and so on? Part of the issue has to do with the way we evaluate our academics, because you get more kudos for writing a paper in a journal that only a limited number of people read than for commercializing your research or for even solving a problem for the government or for private sector through consultancies and so on. As we speak, we are revisiting that entire evaluation criteria to give more weight into the more commercial aspects and the more consultancy work that people do, which are, in my view, as important as writing in a first-rate academic journal. So we are addressing that. Secondly, in the new 5-year strategic plan that starts 1st of August, the university is rightly turning its focus to what the Vice Chancellor has dubbed the revenue resolution. And a large part of it is how do we harness and monetize all the great research that they are doing here. And that will be the focus for the new 5-year period. As it is right now, we're not doing badly because commercial operations really account now for 40% of our revenue, which...
As much as that?
Yes, as much as that. Which
but how much of that is academic driven, though? In terms of your research and so on?
A lot of that, no.
Or how much of it is just... how much of that is just rental you're collecting?
No. The rentals are not the major part. Things like our labs doing those tests is a significant part of that. Part of the thing, though, Mr. Gordon, is that the society and the world doesn't put a lot of value on intellectual work either. And we have to work more closely with places like Jaipur and so on to get the kind of intellectual property protection so that we can monetize these things. I mean, I just published a book recently. I was shocked to know that they don't even make money from publishing a book, hard as it is. So we are really working to unleash that entrepreneurial spirit. And the rent that we get from KFC and those kind of people is not the major part of that 40%. Because as you know, with COVID, most of them are locked down anyway because there are few students here to patronize those commercial businesses. So we are really trying our best. What we want to do is to mainstream that so that people can aspire to do these things, and it is recognized in the promotion process.
One of the problems that we face, the university, as you will already acknowledge, doesn't operate in isolation. It operates as part of a society, part of an economy. If the economy is struggling, the university is not likely to be soaring, right? and so much of the economy's future is dependent on the outputting of the university in terms of providing the skills to really drive economic development, to be able to compete globally. We have major problems. I mean, when we look at the percentage of university, just take UW, percentage of your graduates, for example, who migrate within the first 5 years of graduation is frightening.
Okay.
And those who remain, when I was up there a couple of years ago, I had a look at the tracer studies that were done, and I was amazed at the high percentage of UW graduates who at that time were barely earning, I mean, some of them were under $1 million a year. Now, is part of our problem, Donovan, that too many of our students are studying the wrong things? They're studying things that are not market demanded, and the things that would really give them good jobs, and the thing that would enable them to have a greater impact in terms of economic growth and development. That is where we're struggling to find people, and therefore we're not be able to take advantage of the economic opportunities that the global market offers. Is that a problem? Is there something that we can do about that?
It is a problem, Mr. Golden, and the university needs support to be able to change that. Right now, the Faculty of Social Sciences is our most popular faculty, with about 25 to 30% of all our students studying management and accounting and those things. Those things have its place, but in a small economy like this, we cannot absorb that many accountants and that many managers. But in the Faculty of Engineering, where I think we really need to put out more engineers, we are massively undersubscribed. And I think my own view is that for the same value that government is giving us, and government's contribution, it's not at 80% as it was before, but it's not insignificant. We get nearly 7-8 billion from the government every year, which is a massive amount.
Well,
my own view,
this year budget has it at 9.9.
Well, I think the University Hospital might be in that, which is a
No,
billion.
no. The University what? Hospital. Oh, yeah.
The
Okay.
University Hospital might be in that.
Okay. All right. Fair
So
enough.
we might have moved from 7 to 8. I think for the same spend, we can be a little bit, the government can be a little bit more discriminated in terms of incentivizing people to go into those areas that are required for national development.
Well, when I was in office, Donovan, I proposed that I threw it out as an idea that we would consider, and the Guild of Students were about to shut down the university. They said I was interfering with academic freedom.
No, but you see, if the government funds this thing, my wonder is that the government must have some leeway. There's a basic minimum, of course, but you give a little extra. Engineering, in my view, we need more engineers. Unfortunately, we don't even have agriculture here. It's in Trinidad, but it's one university. We need to put far more money.
My views are a little harsher than that. My view is that if somebody wants to study Turkish anthropology, and the university can offer that course, fine, but pay the full cost.
And where we need the flexibility, because as you say about the Guild, you try moving our fees by 5%, and you see the struggle that we have within the governance bodies of the university in terms of students always crying and so on. But I personally believe that government has to say, listen, we need more engineers, we need more agriculturalists, we need more IT professionals. With the government is depending a lot now on these EPOs, and we want to go to a higher level than just data entry. We really need people in data analytics and that kind of thing.
I agree with you. But my only
where
caveat,
we need to go now.
The only caveat I would impose is that if fees are to be increased, then the availability and accessibility of Student Loan Bureau funds must be increased to counterbalance that.
Yeah.
To make sure that people are not deprived because the fees have reached a stage where it is out of their reach. Make funds available, even if those funds are going to be their burden to repay at a later stage.
But do you know, Mr. Golden, one of the things we are grappling with, and we have done everything to change that and not making a lot of headway, is the extreme aversion of our students to take on student loans.
Well,
we only have 22% or so. I don't even read 20, about 20% thereabout of all our students who are willing to take on a student loan.
Well, interesting that you mentioned that, because I was talking to the president of the UTECH Student Union, and I was asking her how the UTECH students were managing. She gave me some numbers, which came as quite a surprise to me. She said about 50% of the students are on scholarships, either government scholarships, private sector funded scholarships, or scholarships offered by UTECH. So about 30% are on student loans, and the other 20% evidently found some other way of funding their fees. What's your experience at UW?
Well, here at UW, about 20% of our students avail themselves of student loans. I don't know the number offhand, but we do have a significant percentage of our students on scholarship. In fact, before COVID last year, when the COVID really started to make an impact on our revenue, we used to give back about 10% of all we collect from the students in the form of bursaries, which in the 2020-2021 year was over $1 billion. So if we collect whatever amount we collect from students, we're giving back 10%. Students just have an aversion, and people come here just depending on mercy and grace to take them through. They might be able to pay the first semester, have no clue whatsoever how they will get through for the rest of the time. But you cannot propose to them student loan because they say they don't want to start life with a liability and that kind of thing.
Well, that don't make
mindset
sense.
in other developed countries is quite different. People avail themselves of student loan, I hear that Mr. Obama only paid back his student loan when he released his first book. That's the reality. And, well, Americans are not afraid of credit.
Yeah.
And
in fairness, I don't think anybody could say that the student loan bureau terms are onerous.
They're not, but people don't want to know that when they start working, they start paying. I mean, I've heard the opposition leader talking about dispense with guarantors completely because that might be an issue. Some poor guys cannot get someone to be a guarantor for them.
Yeah, but you may you may impair your repayment flows.
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked at the figures, but his own analysis when I listen to him is that the number of times or the quantum that they recover from guarantors in relation to the portfolio is very small anyway. But we have to find a way, innovative way of because it is, particularly since COVID, it is in fact an issue. The other thing too is that almost 2,000-3,000 of our students on a yearly basis from a population of 18,000 students go to the United States every summer and do the work and study business and pay their fees, which is a big percentage. And that's why the last 2 years when they couldn't go because of COVID have been particularly challenging, both for them in terms of completing their courses and for us in terms of our own revenue. So, the Jamaican people have that kind of spirit to go and work and hustle and that kind of thing.
And your courses, as far as I understand it wasn't so during my time. My time is so long ago. But your courses, as I understand it, are flexible enough that people can actually work and study. And I'm not talking about just going up abroad for summer. Mm-hmm. But people can on a continuing basis work and study and still get the degree, no?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we have multiple stream and that kind of thing, and people can choose whether they want to do it part-time or full-time.
Yes.
And of course, university has a open campus, which is even more flexible than the traditional landed campuses.
What is your enrollment now? For close to 20,000, no?
2019-20, we were just under 20,000. Since COVID, we have been having some slippages. I think for the current year, we're about just under 18,000. So we have seen some shift in enrollment. I don't think people have abandoned their studies, but some people take leave of absence for a year or so. Some people withdraw voluntarily to come back again. The interesting thing, though, is that our postgraduate enrollment have gone up because I suspect people are working who already have a first degree, sees COVID as an opportunity to retool themselves and come better. So that's a silver lining.
You mentioned earlier the strategic plan that you say kicks off on 1st of August.
Yeah.
And that is designed to address, among other things, the kind of precarious financial position the university has been in, no?
It's really to put us on a more sustainable financial footing.
Because living on overdraft is not fun.
It's not sustainable, and we don't want the anxiety every month of wondering how we're going to pay salary.
Yes.
That's kind of thing.
Well, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Dr. Donovan Stanbury, the
Mr. Golden,
campus registrar at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies. Thank you so much. We take a break. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99, and we're broadcasting not only here in Jamaica, but we're broadcasting through Ari Jam in New York, and we have Bo Regard on the line. Bo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Golden.
How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great, enjoying the weather here in New York City. Spring is the official first day of spring, so we're in the low 60s right now.
That's good.
Yeah, man.
Today we're talking about how we finance university education, because it's really a challenge here for a lot of youngsters that do well at high school, but the parents, the family, just not able to afford to meet the cost of tuition at our universities. And we have facilities. I mean, we have the Student Loan Bureau and so on. We have scholarships that are offered. but there are still a lot of youngsters who I believe have fallen through the cracks, you know. I know that in America they have a really sophisticated system of funding university education. I mean, the federal government, the state governments, even city governments together provide funding.
Yes.
Some of it, of course, you have to pay back. And of course, you have a lot of charitable foundations that provide endowment for universities, which we don't have as much of in Jamaica. But it's a problem because if we can't train our people, if we can't get them up to the cutting edge in terms of technology, then we're not going to be able to compete in this global market. And we're going to sit down and see products made in Thailand and Philippines come right here, pay the duty, and box us off our own supermarket shelves, you know?
You know, it's sad that, you know, people have to really and truly not be able to live a better life that they would like to because they are unable to afford education. You know, and if we are to agree that education is the key and it's a better way out of poverty and a better future for a lot of kids in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, a better life, a better way of living, then, you know, we also have to ask the question, why the bigger eds make it so expensive?
Yeah. Well, university education is expensive. I mean, our students here complain about the cost of fees at university, at UW, at UTECH, NCU, you name it. But then if you were to divide those, if you were to convert those fees into US dollars and compare them with what is charged at US universities, we are way down the bottom.
Right.
But then as Julian Robinson pointed out, our income is also much lower than what obtains there. So, you know, you have to compare like with like.
Right.
But I made reducing the cost of providing the education is one thing, and I believe, for example, that even our universities here, there are a lot of inefficiencies that can be improved that would reduce costs and therefore enable them to, if not reduce fees, at least not increase them. But ultimately, we're going to have to find a way to assure everybody picnic, whether it is the helper picnic or the barberman picnic or the police corporal picnic. Assure them that, look, once you study at high school and you get the university qualifications, money must not stop you. You must be able to find a way, whether it is through student loan, through scholarships, get your education, get qualified, get a good job. And when you get the good job, you can pay back the student loan. I mean, that's where my mind is, to make sure that if somebody decides they can't bother with no university, it must not because the fees frighten them. There must be a way to insulate them from that.
You know, I'm going to take it a little further, and this is just wishful thinking. I wish that education was free.
Well, it is free in places like Norway, you know, and Denmark. But then in Norway and Denmark, when you earn $1, then the government take 45 cents out of it. And they use that 45 cents to give you not only free education, but free health care.
Right.
Free education all the way to university level.
And the way it is set up in Jamaica, this is why we saw, you know, some of our brothers and sisters had to head to the Ukraine the other day to try to better their education, you know, and look at the situation that they ended up in.
One of our challenges, but it's a serious development challenge, because if we don't train our people, we won't have a skilled workforce. And if we don't have a skilled workforce, we can't compete with the rest of the world. And we are part of the world. We no longer have borders. All, you know, anything coming here now, just pay the duty and you're right down in a half a tree.
Right.
Good to hear you both.
You too, sir.
Yeah. We're talking about financing tertiary education today. We're looking at the challenges, but we're also looking at the possibilities. What new ways can be found? What creative ways can be found? How can we ensure that the cost of tuition must not be an insurmountable hurdle for youngsters? Remember what I said earlier, you know? Out of every 10 students that come out of high school, only 3 of them could go to university anyhow, because only 3 of them are qualifying, are getting the CXC passes that they would need before they could be accepted into a university. So we have a whole heap of backup work to do in terms of fixing education there. But if we just focus on that 30% that qualify to go to university, many of them reach a gate and can't go no further because they can't manage their fees. How can we fix that? And we're pleased to be joined now by two persons who, again, can bring us a perspective based on their own experiences. And we're talking about Mr. Aaron Brown, who is a graduate of the Caribbean Maritime University, now engaged as a customs officer. And we also have joining us Ms. Danielle Mullings, president of the UWI Guild. Welcome to both of you, Mr. Brown, Ms. Mullings. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here.
Let's start with the lady first. Ladies before gentlemen. Danielle, tell me. I was speaking earlier with your counterpart at UTECH.
Yes.
I started out the program expressing a great deal of anguish at the difficulties that students are facing in terms of accessing a university education because of the tuition fees and the fact that there are many families that for whom that is just an impossible kind of expenditure. But she said something to me, and I'd love to know what your experience at UW has been. She said that about half of the students at UTECH are on scholarships of one kind or another, either government scholarship or scholarship provided by the private sector or scholarship provided by UTECH itself. About 3 out of every 10 are recipients of student loans. And then the other 2 would be persons who their families can find the means to pay the fees. What has been your experience at UWI?
All right. Well, that's an interesting statistic there from UTECH. I would say for UE, I know that we don't, I highly doubt that it would be 50% that are on scholarships or bursaries of some form. I'm not currently aware of what that number may be. But with respect to FLB, I know the administration is always saying that we have a relatively low uptake. And that's for different reasons.
Mr. Stanbury told me about 20% on student loans.
Yes, but they want it to be more than that. So they were saying in their eyes it's a relatively low uptake for student loan. And in fact, that's a conversation that we're always having as to why is that number 20% or why couldn't it be more when we know that more students are struggling with it. So, for example, at the UWI, 70% of our students are, actually first-time generation students, the first in their household to be accessing education at the tertiary.
That's very interesting.
Right? Very
so
interesting.
They would be the first persons in their families to get a university education.
Exactly. And so we would be looking at a suite of issues then that the family would now be dealing with for the first time. So, of course, we're going to talk about it from a financial perspective and that kind of support that's needed. But also, if you're in a household and maybe your parents don't understand the kind of, stress or the kind of support system that you may need when you're in university, they may not understand, for example, that you maybe accommodation on campus may be something that you need. That's actually something I've heard from many students because of the community that they may live in or maybe access to internet that they may have at home. It's not feasible for them to do school from wherever their community may be. So many of them say, Danielle, the only way we can access this education is if we're also able to afford housing on campus. And so you're looking at a dual need there, not only the cost for tuition, but also the cost
for the rent and the lodgings.
Exactly.
Plus the bus fare and the lunch money.
And the lunch money. And then we're now going to add on to it how education has changed over the last 2 years given the COVID-19 pandemic, which is that we're moving towards a more digital society and educational experience.
So you need equipment.
Exactly. We now need devices and access to the labs or the computer labs, which not everyone had during
So
the
Danielle, tell me, before we come to Aaron, your peers, how are they coping? How they manage?
But I want to be honest with you, it's very difficult. Very, very difficult. I remember at the start of the pandemic when there was one student who came to me and she said, Danielle, her son had kicked her laptop accidentally, and so only half the screen is working, and she's saying she's trying to do her exam on half of the laptop screen. And there were students who were saying, we don't have those kind of devices, so we're trying to do an exam on a
But
cell
even-
phone, for example.
But even without leave COVID out of it for the time being,
Yeah,
because the problem predates COVID, no?
definitely.
Now, you take a student that come from a typical Jamaican family.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be poor to the extent that they're walking up and down begging,
Yeah,
but every week, every month is a struggle. They have to balance, how they're going to put food on the table, how they're going to make sure that them have the money to meet the landlord when they come at the end of the month, kind of thing.
exactly.
Um,
So what?
But they are faced with a situation. They may, as you say, they may have one child, one member of that family who is the first member of that family ever to seek a university education.
Yes.
But they have to find each year, depending on the course of study, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for tuition alone, not to mention, the living costs and so on.
Exactly.
How do they cope? This is what I'm trying to pin you down on. How they manage?
So it's going to be very, very difficult, as I mentioned earlier. So what you see is that
Me
students
know
are-
it difficult, I want to know how they manage.
how they manage. One thing I see students doing is that they'll take on jobs, and then that becomes an added stressor because there are many students actually who are balancing maybe a full-time job along with a full-time degree program. And so that becomes very stressful, and students may kind of crack under that at some point.
In other words, they're hustling.
Exactly. So you're trying to be present enough in classes to do the assignments and get the grades,
Yes.
but also present enough in work to ensure that you have the money to be able to fund it. Another
Yes.
thing that they turn to would be work and travel over the summer periods. And so there are students who are working some 12-hour shifts, some 18-hour shifts sometimes, trying to work as hard as they can over the summer so that they have enough money to fund it.
To go back next semester.
Exactly.
Aaron.
It's really a hustling.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
What's the experience of people like you who pass through CMU?
My experience at CMU was very unique. As a matter of fact, for my first year, when I got into CMU, I remember I got accepted to CMU in May, and by that time, student loan would have already closed off their applications and so forth, right? Started CMU, doing registration. Up to that point, my father was saying, boy, and I think you would have known my father too, but we'll mention that later. Starting up to that point, my father was saying, boy, we don't know how we are going to finance you going to school, And my father is a praying man. I was a praying man. I love him church. I mean, I always say to him, bro, have your faith, man. He always tell me, have my faith. Have your faith. Have your faith. Have your faith. I was there. School started. The first week of school, I didn't have any money to pay them. Father, work up a little something, find a little money to pay them. I called 3 of my uncles overseas, and 2 of them came through for me. They came through with a little money. Still fall short by about $250,000. I remember I applied to National Youth Service for my first year, and thank God for National Youth Service. I think they're disbanded now. They paid off all of my tuition for the first semester, and then for the second semester, they gave me an additional grant, and they also had something in place where they got 20% off my school fees, and that's how I was able to actually fund myself for my first year in CMU.
How long was your course?
My course was a 4-year course.
Uh-huh. And when did you graduate?
I graduated in 2019.
Uh-huh.
And as a matter of fact, while going to school, especially my second year, the hassle that I had to go through with student loans, whoa. I felt like every other day I was up at the student loan branch. Every other day I was up there.
So what were those difficulties?
It's some little simple things you would never understand why it's so difficult. I mean, you're a student, you have qualifications from the school gives you a document, you bring it there. They say, all right, they can't accept that, they need something else. You bring what they say they need, something missing off that. They say you bring a guarantor, all right, they accept that guarantor, you get another call, boy, there's something out the guarantor. And it's like, it's such a strenuous process, and then when you go there, you give your appointment time, you go your appointment time, you don't get through to another 3 hours later. You go there, you find 300 students there, all come up from morning there till afternoon. You're there.
Let me ask both of you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have 40 universities in Jamaica, no?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody at UW, Danielle, and is there anybody at CMU, Aaron, who is like a for want of a better word, a liaison, somebody on the staff, but who is kind of in regular touch with SLB, so that they can guide the students. They know exactly what document is required, so that you don't go through the kind of run around that Aaron is talking about. Does that exist?
Not while I was going to CMU. I'm sorry, before Danielle. And another example I can give you as well. When I was finishing as well, when I finished CMU and I was supposed to graduate, right? For 2 years, as I said, for my first year, I got a grant and I didn't pay the money. For 2 years, I took student loans, and for my final year, I paid it out of pocket because I started working, right? For the 2 years, there was some mix-up with the document where the school gave me a specific document stating this amount needed to be paid, right? I brought that document to student loans. It was accepted. When I was graduating, I was told that there was an uptick in the price at the time. And they were saying, I brought this document to student loans, so they paid this amount. But there was an additional money to be paid, and student loan is not liable and they're not going to pay it. So I had to find that money out of pocket to pay in order for me to get my degree.
Danielle, what obtains at UW? Is there anybody there that kind of smooths out the process?
So persons would be able to contact like the deputy registrar who would be in direct contact with SLB or any of the persons in the Billings office, generally speaking. But I take the point that you know, though, and I would say that is something that students could benefit from in terms of having somebody who could guide them through the application process itself. We do have a financing session that happens before orientation and so on, especially for freshers, and there are officers from SLB that come and, you know, speak about the process, etc. But I do think that there's more that could be done in terms of that, you know, hand-holding or guiding of how to go through it.
Mm-hmm. And I would even say before the university process, because most of the times students, you have to apply to university from January, February, right? And you have to apply a student loan is in that same period of time as well, without even knowing if you're going to get through to the school. So remember, they have an early closing off time. So I think this is something that should have to be done at secondary level before it even reaches the tertiary level.
Let me pose another question to you, and this is more so for Danielle. And when I pose a question, Aaron will understand. Are the students who are contemplating pursuing studies at UW, are they being properly guided in terms of their course choices? The reason why I want to put that question particularly to you, Danielle, is that I know that at CMU, them get job before them graduate, you know. I mean, their skills are in such high demand, and many of them are getting jobs overseas because some of the shipping companies abroad are sending people here to recruit them.
No, Mr. Golden, it's actually in specific fields because CMU offers some courses that it's difficult for a lot of students when they graduate to find jobs.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, man. Most of my classmates, I was lucky. Most of my classmates, if they're working now, they're not working in their field of study.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But is it that they are choosing the wrong course of study? Danielle, I found that at UW. Mm-hmm. Whether it is because these courses are easier to afford because the fees are less, but a lot of people were choosing courses, and I would ask them, because while I was there, I used to spend some time with some of the students. I used to ask them, I said, why did you choose this course? What kind of job you're planning to pursue when you graduate? And a lot of them look at me blank because they're hoping to find something.
Yeah.
Are they making the wrong course choices?
No, I wouldn't say that they're choosing courses based on what they can afford. I mean, of course, there's always going to be a segment of students who that would affect, because the more higher priced courses would be like you're looking at law and medical sciences. Those are the ones that are quoted in USD, and there's some in humanities and like one course or so on in SciTech and in engineering that are quoted in USD. And so I know that there are students who will turn away from courses like that because they can't afford that figure and will go for something that's cheaper. But for the most part, the majority of courses across the campus would be around the same price. So a person could do many SciTech courses that would cost the same as a social sciences student. Now, I think one area we could look into as a country from a national scale is saying, okay, let us do some analysis of job market trends and where do we want to go as a country. Right now, I know there would be a push towards, technology and, digitization, etc., and we need more students in that. But if we're identifying where those job market trends are, then we can try to, encourage or push students towards it. But in terms of students themselves selecting the wrong ones, I wouldn't say that is really.
But then, Danielle, why is it? If you look at the tracer studies that your university does, there's a whole heap of graduates who are sitting at home can't find a job. And many of those who do manage to find a job are working, some of them barely working $30,000 a week.
And I would love to interject on that as well, Mr. Bowling, when Daniel's finished.
So why is that? If it's not the wrong courses they're studying. And yet every Sunday when you buy the Gleaner, you open up, you see pages and pages and pages of ads of jobs that, some of them running all every week for 6 weeks because they can't find people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a fair point to be made in terms of, but I also think that where students' interests may not necessarily be aligned with the job market to some extent. That could be an issue, but then we also would have to look at, all right, well, from even the primary or the secondary level, what kind of areas would we be coaching students to?
Agree with you entirely.
I wouldn't say that tertiary alone that the problem would be at.
Yeah.
So we have to be looking at job market trends and encouraging people from as young as possible, and then also showing them what are the pathways to get there as you grow. The other thing I would say is education is going to be one thing, but I think to an extent that some skills are transferable. Of course, not all the technical ones, etc. But another area that students are going to need help in is just professional development, generally speaking. And how do you make that transition from the university space to the workforce? Because that is a challenge that we also have.
They're still having employment fairs up at the university where employees come in and indicate the kind of job openings that the market is offering.
Well, I don't know of a full-on fair happening recently, but I do know that the Office of Career Placements was usually help with that. So they will send out different job offers. Also, I know that the different faculties may sometimes have engagements with employers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, and I was commenting on the fact that you say students need more education on the course that they're selecting as well, because in CMU, for example, right, the 3 major degree courses that CMU offer are in engineering, logistics, and customs, right? And I always say to people, you're going to CMU, you have to choose wisely. You have to fully decide what you want to do, right? Because, say, for example, you're a student and you decide you're going to do the customs course, right? You go to CMU and you do the customs course. There are, say, 300 of you from your first year into your final year. When you finish that course and you have your customs degree, how many of you can actually get a job in customs? Or even say it's a customs and brokerage degree. How many of you can get a job in customs or at a brokering firm here in Jamaica, right? Then most people I know that I went to school with that did that course. They're either working in call centers now or they're scrapping or they're trying to find a job now. Because when you do the math, it's very hard for them to break through and get a job here in customs, if you understand what I'm saying. So, and it's kind of the same thing here with the logistics degree as well to an extent as well. Logistics is a bit more widespread, but I think a lot of students decided they were going to do logistics for the promise of a logistics hub or something like that without even truly understanding what that logistics course is. So I think things like those, when students are going to high school, they really need more education or to be more informed.
More guidance.
A lot of times, because a lot of times parents are just saying, hey, go to school, go to a university. In my case, my parents were just glad for me to go to a university. They didn't even care what I was going or where I was going in that sense. They were just glad for me to be going to a university.
Go learn something.
Yeah. And they pushed me and they said, once we got to university, basically from my own in that I had to find the motivation, but a lot of students, they go there without knowing exactly what. A lot of people think, Mr. Boy, they want to see me go do a course now, and they must say, how they going to do this. And I say, why? I speak to them and I say, what is it exactly you're going to do? What is it you want to do out of it? And they say, boy, I don't know, I just think, say, oh, this is so nice, and we can get to work here, so it's not like we can get to work here, and they don't even understand. One of it, I thank God. One of the things I was able to do when I was going to school, I was determined in my second year that I was not going to go back to school third year full-time without having a job. When a lot of my friends were off on work and travel, I was in the summer applying to jobs, working, because I realized, boy, me I look around and I say, boy, the place I move, it's a goal in. Look pretty. See, I see you graduating, look pretty out there. So luckily, I thank God, I was able to get a internship at Customs, and from there, I was able to do what I needed to do. I put in the work, and thank God from there, I was able to progress, and I started going to school part-time while going to work full-time, leaving work, going to school and stuff. But a lot of students decided to go the other route, was the boy, I'll do them work until when they finish school. And again, most of my friends is either when they finish school, is either boy, them can't find a proper job out here, and then gone back afar and gone to the same work they were doing in work and travel.
What you're saying to me is that there are dots that we need to connect, no?
A lot of dots that need to be connected.
Yeah. All right, we're running out of time. I want to thank both of you. Mr. Aaron Brown from Jamaica Customs, a graduate of
From Old Harbour as well, sir.
And from Caribbean Maritime University, and Miss Danielle Mullings, who is the president of the UWI Guild. Thank you both for joining me today.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
That brings us to the end of the program. Another episode, Jamaica Live on Bridge 99. We'll be back next week, Monday, God's willing, to focus on another issue. As I said before, we discuss the issues, we express our views, but we also canvass the views of others. And we hope that in doing that, we're trying to help our minds to search for solutions to make Jamaica a better place. And then remember as well that you can follow us on Instagram at bruce.goldingjm. Let us have your feedback. Let us have your comments. You're part of the program. You're part of the experience. And we appreciate and welcome you. Thank you very much. See you next week, Monday.